You've probably heard of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's one of those books that has completely changed how millions of people think about money. And it's all built on a pretty radical idea that what most of us learn about finances, from our parents or even at school, might actually be what's keeping us poor. So today, we're going to dig into the core lessons from Robert Kiyosaki's story, starting with the two totally different mindsets that are at the very heart of it all.
Right off the bat, Kiyosaki hits you with these two completely opposite ways of looking at the world. On one side, you have his poor dad, who taught that classic, almost fearful view of money. But on the other side, his rich dad saw things differently. For him, the lack of money was the real enemy. This single difference in philosophy, well, it's the key that unlocks the entire book.
So who exactly were these two dads? Well, the poor dad was his actual biological father, a really smart guy, highly educated with a PhD, but who, despite having a good government job, always struggled with money. Then there was the rich dad. This was his best friend's father, a guy who dropped out of school in the 8th grade but went on to build a business empire and become one of the wealthiest men in Hawaii.
And this right here, this perfectly sums up their different game plans. Poor Dad's advice was all about becoming a great employee, the safe traditional route. Rich Dad's advice was about becoming an owner. See the difference? It's a huge shift from just working in the system to actually owning the system.
When it came to risk, they were on totally different planets. Poor Dad's philosophy was to avoid risk at all costs, which really meant just clinging to that idea of job security. Rich Dad, on the other hand, saw risk as something you don't run away from. You learn to understand it, to manage it. He taught that real financial security doesn't come from a paycheck, it comes from competence.
Oh, and this one is huge. It really gets to the core of their mindsets. I can't afford it? That's a statement. It's a full stop. It basically tells your brain to shut down. But how can I afford it? Now that's a question. It forces your brain to switch on, to start looking for solutions, to really exercise that financial muscle. One mindset just creates a dead end, while the other creates endless possibilities.
So this wasn't just philosophy. It became a real-world education for Kiyosaki when he was just 9 years old. After another kid called him poor, he went and asked his dad how to get rich. His dad didn't really have an answer, so he sent him to his friend's father, the rich dad. And that's where his real lessons began, with let's say, a very unusual job offer.
10 cents. An hour? That was his starting salary. For 3 hours every Saturday, young Robert and his friend Mike would dust off canned goods in one of Rich Dad's stores. Their grand total for a day's work, 30 cents. As you can imagine, the excitement of having a job wore off really, really fast.
After just 3 weeks, he'd had enough. He felt totally cheated and used. He was giving up his Saturday baseball games, and all he had to show for it were a couple of comic books. He was ready to walk, completely convinced that Rich Dad was just some greedy guy taking advantage of him. But it turns out that little outburst, that was exactly what Rich Dad was waiting for.
So picture this. A frustrated 9-year-old Kiyosaki marches into Rich Dad's office, ready to demand a raise and quit. He was probably expecting an argument, or maybe to just get fired on the spot. But what he got instead was a complete surprise and his first real lesson about how money works.
Instead of getting defensive, Rich Dad just calmly pointed out that Robert's complaints, feeling underpaid, unappreciated, blaming his boss, were the exact same thoughts that keep most people trapped their entire lives. The lesson was never about the 10 cents. It was all about Robert's reaction to it.
And this is the real question Rich Dad was asking. He explained that most people just let life push them around. You know the drill. A bill comes, you get scared, so you go work harder. You get your paycheck, and the cycle just repeats. People get angry at their boss or their job, but they never stop to see what's really pushing them, their own fear and their own ignorance about money.
This is the absolute heart of Rich Dad's philosophy. All of life's struggles, the low pay, the annoying boss, the bills piling up, they aren't just problems to be dealt with. They're lessons in disguise. Most people either quit or they fight back, but they're fighting the wrong thing. A few people, though, they learn the lesson and they move on, a little wiser and a little wealthier. So here's the big mental shift. Rich Dad taught him that if you think your boss is the problem, you'll spend your life trying to change your boss. But if you realize that your perspective is the problem, well, you can change yourself. And that right there is where the real power is.
And all of this leads us to the book's #1 most foundational lesson.
The poor and the middle class work for money. They trade their time for a paycheck. The rich, on the other hand, have their money work for them. And that's how they escape what Kiyosaki calls the rat race. So what keeps people in this trap? According to Rich Dad, it all comes down to one powerful emotion: fear. The fear of not being able to pay the bills, the fear of getting fired, the fear of not having enough. This fear is what drives most people's career choices. It's not passion, it's not a grand purpose, it's just fear. And it dictates their whole financial life.
And this creates a vicious cycle. You have the fear of being without money, and then you have the desire for all the nice things money can buy. That combination traps people in a pattern. They get up, go to work, pay bills, and just repeat, day after day. They effectively become slaves to their paycheck, always chasing the next dollar without ever stopping to learn how money really works.
This idea is so central to his thinking that Kiyosaki later developed what he calls the cash flow quadrant to explain it. You've got E for employee and S for self-employed on one side. That's where you work for money. Then on the other side, you have B for business owner and I for investor. That's where your systems or your money work for you. And moving from one side to the other requires a massive shift in your mindset.
To really break this old mindset, Rich Dad gave Kiyosaki and his friend one last test. He said, okay, now you're going to keep working, but this time, I'm not paying you anything. The whole point was to force their brains to detach from the idea of a paycheck and start seeing the opportunities to create money that were right there in front of them, instead of just waiting for someone to hand it to them.
Okay, so once you've learned not to work for money, the next critical lesson is about financial literacy. Specifically, it's about knowing the real difference between an asset and a liability. And Rich Dad's definitions, while they are radically simple, and they challenge pretty much everything we're normally taught.
Let's take the perfect example, your house. Poor Dad, just like most people, believed his home was his biggest asset. Rich Dad was blunt. He said your house is a liability because every single month it takes money out of your pocket through things like a mortgage, taxes, insurance, and repairs.
The power of Rich Dad's definitions is just how simple they are. This is his entire definition of an asset. It doesn't matter what the bank says or what an accountant might tell you. The only thing that matters is this: if it puts money in your pocket consistently, it's an asset. Think of things like rental properties that generate cash flow or stocks that pay dividends. And a liability? Well, it's the exact opposite. It's anything that takes money out of your pocket. This includes your car payment, student loans, credit card debt, and yes, even the mortgage on your primary residence. The rich, he says, spend their lives acquiring assets. The poor and middle class spend their lives acquiring liabilities that they think are assets.
And so, that leaves us all with a final, pretty provocative question. When you look at your own financial life through this simple lens, does it put money in your pocket or take money out? What do you see? According to Robert Kiyosaki, answering that question honestly, that is the very first step toward achieving real financial freedom.